Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a seriously fascinating story of economic evolution. We're going to look at India's incredible transformation, but specifically through the lens of its international trade. You know, no country is entirely self-sufficient, right? Trade is basically the lifeblood of a growing economy. But here's the thing. How a nation trades, what it buys, what it sells, and how it physically moves all those goods tells you pretty much everything you need to know about its development. Plus, it ultimately dictates the prices of the stuff you buy every single day. So let's jump right in and see how India has completely reshaped its role on the global stage.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We're starting with India's massive trade explosion. Then we'll check out the shifting export basket. After that, we'll trace the journey from food grains to petroleum, map out global partners and networks, and finally, look at the physical gateways themselves, seaports, and the rise of air cargo.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, India's massive trade explosion.
To really grasp where India's trade is sitting today, we actually have to look back at where it started in the mid-20th century. And honestly, the sheer, mind-boggling scale of growth here is just incredible. Back in 1950 to 51, India's external trade was worth 1,214 crore rupees. Fast forward to 2020-21, that figure has exploded to a staggering 77,019,796 crore rupees. I mean, that's not just growth, that's an absolute sea change. And it directly translates to more global products sitting in your home right now. This massive spike is driven by a really powerful momentum in manufacturing, totally liberalized government policies, and an aggressive push to diversify global markets.
Moving right along to Section 2, the shifting export basket.
So it's not just the total volume that's transformed. What a country actually sells to the rest of the world tells you a ton about the health and the direction of its economy. Looking at the 2021-22 export composition, manufactured goods absolutely dominate the game, making up almost 68% of total exports. Crude and petroleum products sit at about 16.4%, while agriculture and allied products, which, remember, used to be the absolute backbone of India's traditional economy, now make up just 11.9%. This tells a very clear story. India has basically shifted from being primarily an agrarian exporter to a really serious industrial powerhouse.
Now, the crucial thing to note is that within these overarching categories, a lot of nuanced shifting is happening. For instance, we're seeing a decline in some of the more traditional agricultural exports, like cashew, and that's largely just due to tough international competition. But India is adapting brilliantly. We're seeing a noticeable rise in floriculture, fresh fruits, marine products, and sugar. And stepping away from the farm entirely, gems and jewelry are contributing a massive share to India's foreign trade. But perhaps most importantly for the future, engineering goods. They are showing highly significant growth, which keeps India incredibly competitive globally and brings those higher-paying manufacturing jobs right back to the domestic market.
Let's hit Section 3, from food grains to petroleum.
Just as we've explored what goes out, we need to talk about what comes in. Because honestly, the story of a nation's imports is often the story of its changing survival needs. In the 1950s and 60s, India faced really serious domestic food shortages. That meant the major items coming off the cargo ships were literally just food grains to keep the population fed. But then, the 1970s brought a crucial turning point. The phenomenal success of the Green Revolution meant food imports could largely be stopped. However, and this is a big however, right around that exact same time, the 1973 energy crisis hit, and it pushed petroleum prices sky high. So suddenly, India went from desperately importing food to heavily importing petroleum and fertilizers, all to fuel its growing industries and its brand new agricultural models.
Bringing that historical shift into the present day, the 2021-22 import basket paints a totally new picture. Fuel and petroleum products now make up almost a third of all imports, at 31.6%. Capital goods are at 10.1%. And food and allied products? They've shrunk all the way down to just 4.4%. Now, it is super important to understand that this imported petroleum isn't just the gas for your daily commute. It is a critical industrial raw material. It's helping create the plastics, the fertilizers, and the power grids you rely on every single day. This huge demand perfectly reflects the rapid tempo of rising industrialization in the country.
Now, here is a fascinating little paradox, straight from our sources. Why does India, a nation incredibly rich in agriculture, still import massive quantities of edible oil? Well, it really comes down to a question of scale. It highlights that even with a super strong agricultural base, massive population demands combined with specific crop yields can literally force an economy to look outward just to balance its daily consumer needs. It's a great reminder that international trade is actually deeply intertwined with your basic grocery list.
All right, Section 4, Global Partners and Networks.
So who exactly is on the other side of these billion-dollar handshakes?
When we break down imports by region for 2021-22, the numbers paint a really clear geographic picture. Notice the sheer dominance of the Asia and ASEAN region. We're talking about pulling in over 29 lakh crore rupees in trade. That is huge. Europe is a distant second at roughly 6.4 lakh crore, followed by North America and then Africa. What this tells us is that India's strongest supply chains and trading networks are highly localized within that greater Asian and ASEAN economic sphere. So regional stability over there directly affects the goods arriving at Indian shores.
Moving into the physical world with Section 5, Seaports, the trade gateways.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the abstract billions of dollars and all these percentages, but how do these literal mountains of goods actually move? Grounding us in physical reality, imagine massive industrial grabbers unloading bulk cargo straight from a ship's hold into a waiting truck. That is the daily, grinding, heavy-lifting reality of international trade. While a small fraction of trade goes over land to neighbors like Nepal or Bangladesh, the overwhelming majority of this multi-billion-dollar dance relies entirely on these massive coastal gateways.
And you know, the history of these ports is basically a direct reflection of India's own geopolitical journey. Back during the British era, ports were essentially designed as suction points, built just to drain resources from the interior for export. Then, in 1947, partition dealt a huge blow. It stripped India of two highly crucial ports. Karachi went to Pakistan, and Chittagong went to erstwhile East Pakistan. To compensate for that massive loss, independent India had to scramble to build new gateways, like Kandala in the west and Diamond Harbor in the east. Decades of modernization later, by 2016, Indian ports were handling a colossal 837 million tons of cargo.
Why ports, you ask? Well, water provides a remarkably smooth, frictionless surface for transport. That makes it the absolute cheapest way to move incredibly heavy, bulky commodities across the globe. Because India is surrounded by sea on three sides, this long coastline is arguably one of the country's greatest natural economic assets. And interestingly enough, the West Coast actually boasts more ports than the East Coast, which gives it a really unique geographic advantage when it comes to maritime trade.
Let's do a super quick tour of some of these vital gateways, because they each actually have highly specialized roles. Mumbai is the biggest natural harbor and houses the country's largest oil terminal. Just next door, you've got Jawaharlal Nehru Port, or Nhava Sheva. This was built to relieve Mumbai's pressure, and it's now the largest container port in the country. Up in Gujarat, Kandla is specially designed to receive huge quantities of petroleum and fertilizers. Over on the East Coast, Chennai is an artificial harbor built way back in 1859, making it one of the oldest. And Paradwip in Odisha? That one has the deepest harbor, making it perfectly suited to handle massive vessels for large iron ore exports.
Finally, Section 6, the rise of air cargo.
So while the sea routes handle the heavy lifting, the sky handles the speed. Air transport is a totally different game. India utilizes 25 major airports to participate in global air trade. Now, obviously, air freight is incredibly costly. It is completely unsuitable for heavy, bulky stuff like coal or iron ore. But when it comes to high-value goods like electronics or pharmaceuticals or perishable items like fresh flowers and fruits that literally need to cross the world in hours, not weeks, these aerial gateways are absolutely indispensable.
And the network is expanding like wildfire. Consider this. Recently, under the government's UDAN scheme, a total of 73 previously unserved or underserved airports have been operationalized. This aggressive expansion of the aviation network means that the interior of the country is getting plugged into international supply chains faster than ever before. It really democratizes trade, allowing a business in a much smaller city to ship its products globally, essentially overnight. That's a real game changer.
Which brings us to the future. Our source material notes that India aims to actually double its share in international trade within the next 5 years, using measures like import liberalization and reduced duties. So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. If trade volume is truly set to double, how will these massive physical gateways, both on the coasts and up in the skies, have to evolve to handle that kind of tidal wave of growth? It is a massive logistical puzzle, and it's going to be incredibly exciting to watch it unfold. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. For daily APPSC Group 2 study material and updates, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon.